As I mentioned earlier, this is known as Transfiguration Sunday. And this is one of the passages that corresponds to that particular Sunday in the liturgical calendar. It's from Matthew chapter 17. It begins with verse 1. May God bless to our receiving the Holy Scripture, and may God's Word speak to us through that. Matthew 17, 1 through 9. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and his brother John, and he led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. And his face, it shone like the sun, and his clothes, they became dazzling white. And suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah, who were talking with Jesus. And Peter said to Jesus, "Well, Lord, it's good for us to be here. If you wish, we'll make 3 tabernacles, 3 tents for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah, and one for you." While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud, it overshadowed them. And from the cloud a voice said, "This is my Son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground. They were overcome with fear. But Jesus came and he touched them, and he said, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except for Jesus himself alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, "Tell no one about the vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." May God bless the receiving of the sacred Scripture. Amen. 1976. My relationship with my high school sweetheart had just crashed and burnt, and she was marrying one of my downhill skiing buddies. So did my friendship with the downhill skiing buddy. I was taking an ecology class in school, and it taught me all about J curves. You know, the population explosion J curve, and the curve of global extinctions. You know, for thousands of years we increased like this, and then all of a sudden we're spiking. The J curve of environmental pollutants, the potential risks for nuclear annihilation, the J curve along with that. There was a whole labyrinth of prognostications that left me convinced that this fragile planet of ours was going to last maybe 3 or more trips around the sun before it all came to an apocalyptic end. So what are you supposed to do? Climb a mountain. That's what I did. I joined 25 other students and took a trip to San Isabel National Forest in Colorado. And we were going to climb to the top of Mount Shabana. Shabana is one of what are known as the 14ers in the continental United States. It towers up over 14,000 feet. And it was an amazing climb going up there. Things looked very differently as you were climbing up. You felt differently as you were climbing up. And once you're to the summit, I think it was like 14,250 or something, 14,250 feet above the sea. The view is absolutely spectacular. It's just overwhelming. The world from up there looks completely different. You can see for miles and miles and miles, as the Who used to sing. And the sun was so bright that even with glacier glasses, it almost hurt your eyes. Only 5 of us made it up to the summit. Part of that was because from down below, it was hard to tell which of the 3 saddlebags were Shabana, and a lot of the group went up some of the lower mountains which looked the same height down below. But I was one of the fortunate 5 that happened to choose the right one. We got up to the top, and I was tired. I sat down and leaned against a boulder, and I dozed off. And it seemed like just seconds later, Mary White, she was another gal that made it up to the top. She shook me from the shoulder, and she woke me up, and she said, "Chips, we gotta go, we gotta go. Look," and she pointed at the adjacent mountain, and clouds were just all over around it. There was lightning flashing over there, and then this herd of wild horses, thundering clouds, they started coming toward us from the other mountain. And we were up on top of the world in 1 minute, bright, shining sun bathing in its warmth, and in the next moment, adrenaline is pumping through your body, and fear and foreboding, it blows out all the bliss you're feeling, and the darkness of the storm is just sweeping down on top of us. And so we took off down the mountain, bounding from one outcropping to another, one boulder to the next. We're moving down there like mountain goats, you know. And then the icy rain started coming in sheets. And then it started to hail. And we tried to pull our ponchos up, and the wind was blowing so bad that it just didn't do any good. It whipped them all over. So we skittered, and we ran, and we bounded, and we jumped faster and faster. We went trying to outrun the wind and the rain and the lightning, especially the lightning. The mountaintop, it was fabulous, But the mountaintop, it isn't a place you can stay, not for long. But people spend millions of dollars and risk their lives and their limbs to climb into the mysteries of the mountains. It happens all the time. Why? Well, maybe it's because climbing mountains, risking it all to get to the peak, it causes people to see things differently. Maybe it causes them to see themselves differently. The mountain is central in Matthew's gospel. From beginning to end, the mountain is important in the way Matthew wrote. It's on the mountain that the devil shows Jesus all the kingdoms of the world and the temptation he goes through. It's on the mountain that Jesus gives his most famous sermon, the Sermon on the Mount. Luke puts it on a plane. Matthew elevates it up on top of a mountain, the same sermon, the relatively same one. It's on the mountain that Jesus goes to retreat in prayer. It's on the Mount of Olives that Jesus, his blood's dripping, or his sweat's dripping down like drops of blood just before the terrible crucifixion. And it's on the mountains that the disciples receive the Great Commission. And it's on the mountain that Jesus goes through this transfiguration. He's metamorphosed. I don't know what the actual word is. But just like Moses, when he came down with the commandments, Jesus is glowing from head to foot. And like the prophet Elijah, apparently God has made himself known to Jesus there on the mountain. Now the mountaintop is a place where the disciples find themselves in the midst of this theophany. That's a theological word simply to describe the experience, an overwhelming experience of God. Now, some scholars, when I was in seminary, some of the professors, they would talk about this story, the Transfiguration story, that Matthew messed up when he put it where he did. It was supposed to be a resurrection account, glowing and all that. There's no resurrection accounts that we have that have him, otherworldly in that kind of way. But those professors thought that it was misplaced. But one of my professors disagreed with that opinion. His name was Tom Long. He was a professor at Princeton. And he said that Matthew placed that particular story, the Transfiguration story, in just the right place in his gospel. It takes place, he says, right in the center of Jesus' ministry. And it takes place at a very dark time in Jesus' ministry. Jesus, he's been labeled as a blasphemer. His enemies say he's been possessed by a demon. Even his friend and colleague, John the Baptist, he's expressing doubts about Jesus at this point. Jesus has been rejected in his hometown. He can't perform miracles there because they don't believe. He's resisted by the very people that he's come to serve and to save. And there are murder plots evolving all around him constantly. His life and his ministry is moving rapidly toward the dark shadow of the cross. The dark shadow of the cross. It's not the storm that chases Jesus off the mountain. In some ways, it's the storm that brings him to the mountain. Because it's in this dark, shadowy valley of his everyday life, precisely in this time of woe for Jesus, that Jesus is transfigured on the mountaintop. He goes to the mountaintop, he undergoes this metamorphosis of sorts. He's changed. And it's right at this transfiguration, this metamorphosizing moment, if you will, that we're called, that Matthew calls us to remember Jesus' baptism and also to anticipate his resurrection. The storm clouds, they're gathering overhead for Jesus, and then as right in the midst of the storm clouds almost, we hear a voice. And the voice we hear are the identical words that we heard way back at the beginning of Matthew's Gospel in chapter 3. And the words are this: "This is my Son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased." And then the only difference between baptismal words that are heard in this section here is that there's an additional comment that says, listen to him. So the storms of rejection are coming down on Jesus, dark nights of the soul, dark nights of doubt. Rejection is kind of attacking him in a lot of ways. The murderous plans are unfolding all around him. And all of it, and that is the ability to kind of cloud our ability to see who Jesus is as you're reading through the story. We're kind of put in a position like John the Baptist. And we're left kind of wondering at this point in the gospel reading, have we gotten the wrong boat? You know, should we get to shore, get off, and find someone else to follow? But then up on this mountain top, it's as if God takes and opens up the curtains for a little bit, so we can see who this Jesus truly is. This is my Son, the heavenly voice reveals. My beloved child, the one with whom I am well pleased. Tom, he put God's words into this little story, and he said, this is God speaking, you know. He was my beloved Son at baptism, and he's still my beloved Son, even on the stormy slope where he's stumbling toward Golgotha. And he will be my beloved Son when he appears in glory before the throne. Well, one creed, it puts it, he was Lord at the beginning, he will be Lord at the end, and even now, Jesus is Lord. You see, we see it all differently from on the mountaintop. The mountaintop, it has the ability to kind of draw our eyes up, away from the ordinary stuff going on, the mundane, the toil and strife, away from the sometimes dread and despondency and even despair that we experience down here. It's the promise of the mountaintop that's there for us. And I think that's part of why we come together in church on Sunday morning, too. We're looking for just a touch of the mountaintop, you know, maybe a hilltop or maybe a little rise. It's pretty flat out there, but a little rise. But maybe we're looking for just a little bit of that when we come here on Sunday morning. We look to the mountains, I think, when we need a whisper of hope. And the truth of the Transfiguration is a truth that we need to see, that enables us to see the world around us a little differently. We're able to see Jesus a little differently, and we're able to see ourselves a little differently. We're able to see ourselves not simply as kind of plodding along through the backside of winter, or through the road salt and the slush of life. Not seeing ourselves as we currently are, not seeing ourselves in the midst of the struggles that we're currently having. You know, some of us are experiencing very difficult times in relationships. Some of us have had chronic illness that just won't shake loose. Some of us have had terrible accidents. Some of us have had experiences with addictions that don't seem to let go of us. And we get lost in all of that. Sometimes we just can't see out of it. But we're to be looking, this story calls us to see ourselves as we shall be in God's presence. But when things are all set right, and when we ourselves are made right. In order to become a minister in most denominations, ministerial candidates, they have to be examined and tested theologically. It used to be, well, in mainline churches anyhow, it's a pretty rigorous and grueling ordeal to be ordained. Now I think you can go online and get a certificate of ordination for 50 cents or whatever it costs, I don't know. But the church has traditionally viewed that the great responsibility goes with the process of being ordained. And the church has consistently wanted to make sure that the people that are leading the congregations are theologically sound. Okay, they need to know that before they ordain the person, so they ask us theological questions. Tom Long, he shared this story with our class before. There's a story about a veteran minister who was part of one of these processes that asked the students before they were ordained. Series of questions that they go through this process. And this particular guy always asked the same question every single time with every potential candidate. And he'd been asking the same question for, at that time, 30 years, you know. He's probably in God's mirror presence asking questions now. But he would begin by asking the candidate to come over to the window. They were up on the third floor or something. And the puzzle examinee, he'd come over there, and then the professor or the pastor would say, tell me when you see a person outside there. I see one. The candidate would kind of haltingly announce and say, do you know him personally? No, sir. Well, that's good. That's good. Now my question is this, he said, will you describe that person theologically? In the 3 decades of his experience at that point, this seasoned minister, he found that the candidates gave one of 2 answers. And, you know, when you boil it down, there'd be 1 of 2 different kinds of answers. Some would say something like, well, the person's a sinner in need of redemption through Jesus Christ. There were others, though, that would respond, well, whether that person knows it or not, they are a child of God, loved and upheld by the grace of God in Christ Jesus. And this old seasoned minister, he reflected on that, and he said, technically, both of those answers are correct. But it's my experience, he said, that those who give the second answer make the better ministers. The reason is because they have the gift of kind of a transfiguration vision of the world around them. They're able to see people in the present tense, in the middle of their circumstances, whatever you're going through, being able to see them in their present situation. But they're also able to see them as they were at the very beginning of creation, if you will. And they're able to see that person as they will be in the future, as God's fully healed, fully complete child of God. One of the long stories, it was about a woman, we call her Jessica. And she called the minister at his house and asked her to come to the hospital. She was in the hospital. And she just received this terrible news from her physician. The cancer had returned with a vengeance. And there wasn't anything more they could do. You know, everything that could be done had been done. And her time on this planet was no longer a matter of months. It was now a matter of weeks, maybe even just a few days. And so Jessica's minister arrived, and Jessica shared this news with him. And they both just kind of grieved for a moment, and then she made a request of him. She asked, I want you to get some of the elders from the church, and I want you to come down here, just like it says in the Bible in the book of James. And I want you to pray for me and anoint my head with oil. Now the minister, he was a Presbyterian, not really taken to the process of the ritual of unction, you know, last rites kind of thing. He wasn't part of the healing camp of the charismatics either. And so he was kind of put off, but he didn't know what to make of this request. I'm not sure I can do that, he said. It sounds kind of like magic, more magic than ministry to me. But she looked at him and she said, no, I'm going to die. I know I'm going to die. The doctors have made that clear. I'm never going to leave this hospital alive. Then why do you want me to anoint you with oil? Because, she said, it'll be a sign that death is not going to have the last word with me. It's going to be a sign that I belong to Jesus Christ, and a sign that in the power of God, I'm already healed. I'm already healed. And so the minister, a few others, they gathered around her bed, and the pastor prayed something like this. Lord, long ago, when Jessica was an infant, another minister held her and prayed over her and laid his hands on her head and said the ancient words, I baptize you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Lord, we now offer our prayer for her again, right here and right now. In the depths of her pain, we ask you to reach down to her and give her that deep awareness that she is your beloved child. Well, that whole experience was an experience of transfiguration discernment, you might call it. Because in that experience, they were being able to see Jessica and themselves, remembering her baptism and their own, glimpsing her in the midst of her sufferings, just like all of us, are dealing with our own present issues and sufferings, and also seeing her through the lens of the resurrection of the body. We come here with a lot of different experiences, a lot of different histories. Most of us come with at least some skeletons in our closet. Most of us come with, to a certain degree, we're all damaged goods. And sometimes we can get lost in all of that, or with a particular slings and arrows or outrageous torture that just happen to hit us at a given time. And sometimes we just lose sight of who we are. And so I challenge you. Last week we just had a very vocal baptism of that little gal right back there, Casey. She went kicking and screaming, but she went wet. But I'd like you to just remember your own baptism. If you've been baptized, if you haven't, just talk to me about it. And see your present experience as connected to that baptism. And then look also beyond your present experience into that realm where you'll be fully healed, where you'll be fully reconciled with those that you're not in sync with right now. That you'll be the child of God in all your fullness as you're meant to be. So sisters and brothers in Christ, those who have been baptized into his life, those who live in his presence in the midst of this world of ours, with all of their J-curves, in the fullness of God's kingdom. I challenge you to walk faithfully, trusting that you too are the beloved children of God. Thanks be.